of the committee here present and accounted for. Also have Trustee Stokebrand and President McCaig here for this meeting. And just one item on the agenda this evening, and that is to consider the recommendations regarding curb extensions and advisory bike lanes in the 2023 Edgewood Avenue resurfacing program design. Director Bushlick, anything that you want to add for us, or can we go straight into public feedback? Okay, so we took this item up previously and had a conversation and wanted to allow at a special Public Works Committee meeting and wanted to allow opportunity for the Parks and Public Spaces Committee to review the proposal and make a recommendation to this body before we were to make a recommendation to the full village board. So at this time, I would ask if there is a representative of the Parks and Public Spaces Committee who is able to come and speak on this recommendation, please.
Thank you. Gary Bronk, 1827 East Kenmore Place. I'm the chair of the committee. So I want to start by saying that when this proposal was presented to us at the meeting, the prior meeting of the Public Works Committee, and we discussed in the committee, there's significant skepticism on the part of quite a few of our members about this proposal, in part because it's relatively new. People haven't had much experience of it. We haven't done it in Shorewood before. It's new even in Milwaukee. So we just sort of were interested in trying to figure out what the implications were of this. And I'll say that I think it's the research findings that have sort of turned the committee around. And that is in the memo that you're linked to, drafted by Sandy Pendleton, which reflects the discussion that our committee had. We talk a little bit about the robust research findings that are really very supportive of this proposal in two ways. One is that the proposal includes curb extensions, and we know from the research that curb extensions enhance pedestrian safety. And the experience with advisory bike lanes, which is pretty robust at this point, something like 70 places have advisory bike lanes, also shows that advisory bike lanes contribute to slowing down the traffic, which also contributes obviously to pedestrian safety and to bicycle safety. So because of that, I think the sentiment of the committee, and there was a unanimous vote on this, is that we, at a general level, support the basic elements of the redesign that's being proposed by the city. That is, no center line, advisory lanes, maintaining parking on both sides, curb extensions. There's only one curb extension that's pinpointed, which is the curb extension at Edgewood in Maryland. We think that there's things that could be done to enhance pedestrian safety. We particularly would be interested in more curb extensions. I think both the city and the village have some concerns about that and might not think it's practical. We think that a center line within 50 feet of controlled intersections gives a signal to drivers who otherwise might not understand what the street's all about, that this is a different kind of street and that they should be a little bit careful about it. It's sort of a way of enhancing, is putting drivers on notice. This is being done in some cities. And finally, we think that an education campaign is very important. There's been pushback in some places where this was first implemented. People didn't understand what the design was supposed to accomplish. I think that there needs to be an effort to really educate people in the community about the value of this and what it has, what it offers in terms of pedestrian safety and bicycle safety. So I think that would be an important component of it. I think that one of the absences that we noted, or at least were not evident to us, is that we've not been clear how UWM has been involved in these discussions, and maybe the city could sort of help me understand that a little bit. My sense is that there's been a lot of planning on the part of UWM in terms of bicycle and pedestrian usage, and it wasn't clear to us whether they've been very engaged in it. We've heard informally, both from the interim sustainability director and from the chair of the Department of Urban Planning, that they think is a good proposal. They would agree with us that they think that more bump outs or more pedestrian bump outs would be a useful thing. One of them even suggested using temporary roundabouts as an experiment. We're not really proposing that as a committee, but I think that's something to sort of think about. I've heard comments from citizens. There were citizens that were here at the meeting you had. A couple citizens came to our meeting the last time. I've had a few notifications. Frankly, emails. Frankly, they're mixed. Some people don't understand it. Some people think it's be a great idea. Some people are very concerned. There are people who would like to see no parking along that street, who would like to see permanent bike lanes, protected bike lanes. So there's some confusion about there. But I think that one of the things that the research shows is that after a couple months of doing advisory bike lanes, people come around to liking it. We support it. There's some qualifications, but that's sort of the position that we have.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the work that you all put into this. And I think there are some great suggestions here. Also very much agree that a robust communication is needed. I've got a fairly newly licensed driver in my home who I know would not have any idea, not really know what to do right away. So I think having a good education campaign to make sure people really understand how to deal with a new road configuration would be very important. Were there any other members of the community who had comments that they want to share with us this evening? Okay, so we just ask since we are recording this, that you come up to the microphone and just state your name and address, please.
Trustee Moore Baldoff, when she concludes, Trustee Ursink also has his hand raised.
Oh, okay. Thank you. No, you can go ahead and go first.
Dan Wexner, 3544 Murray Avenue, North Murray Avenue. When you talk about having the split lane before you get to major intersection, what happens to the bike lane at that point? But the rest of the place, the cars are sharing traffic in both directions with no center line. Right. So we're from California, we're avid cyclists, and a lot of the times when there's not really room for a bicycle lane because of the parking, they make you share the road and they have the bicycle signal, they still have the road divided. Was that anything that was considered here? I see your point. Because not just new drivers, but any driver who sees a car coming towards them is going to swerve where the advisory bike lane is before looking to see if there's a cyclist. Because a car is more of an impediment, especially in head-on. Just having been here for a few weeks and visited many times, half a block from Edgewood, we see how crazy the drivers are. They don't even stop at the stop signs on Murray and Edgewood, at least most of the ones we've seen. And we've seen cyclists not stop at stop signs, which is something that needs education as well. They have to obey the law as if they are a vehicle. I just was curious if there was consideration for sharing the whole lane. That wasn't. And my other question is, I know they've done this in Colorado. What were the statistics of, were there more accidents and more cyclists hit? I did not have a sense. Well, that's good. I would be very frightened for quite a while to ride in an advisory bike lane. I think I would take the lane because when you're in the lane with the car, they're going to go around you. They're going to go into traffic, not have traffic coming to them. And that's just my consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. And it sounds like Trustee Ursink had some comments as well.
Thank you, Trustee Baldoff. I just wanted to follow up on Mr. Bronk's sort of presentation. And I know education, I think we're all sort of very interested in that component because as we know, communication, more education in our community serves everybody well. And I know as part of the Ped and Bike Safety Committee that education is actually a really big component of what they do or should be doing. And wondering if that is now something that they will be taking on is creating some sort of educational component with that group as far as this, not only this is concerned, but maybe more sort of biking safety related sort of issues within the village, and would just love to hear if that is going to be an initiative that is going to be put on by the Bike and Ped Safety Committee.
Well, we're suggesting that it's an initiative that the village needs to be very serious about. I mean, as a bike and ped safety committee within the Parks and Public Spaces Committee, we have limited resources. We're not really prepared to mount the kind of campaign that I think is going to reach a lot of people. We have done some educational things around bicycle safety, especially at the time early in the school year, geared primarily to children. It's certainly something that we believe is important, and we're there to help. But I don't see us assuming the major responsibility for doing this, given the resources that we have.
Just to follow up on that, I think, everybody at the village is also pretty stretched thin. And with this being a focus of yours, if there were resources, I don't know if you're talking financial or what kind of resources exactly you would need, but you have several experts on your committee that would do a much more thorough job than I think we would here at the village. So maybe it could be a coordinated effort, but for any kind of educational campaign, everybody from trustees to staff is stretched very thin at the moment. So I would just say maybe it's something you guys could consider, consider working on with maybe help from the village and maybe resources from the village. But if that's something that you're asking the village to do, I would imagine that everybody from DPW to village manager, the assistant, there's a lot of big projects on the table right now, and I think this would be a pretty hard task for us, and we would need your assistance as well, because you guys are the experts. So just something to kind of continue to talk about. But
Sure,
but
absolutely.
it'd be great to see you guys really spearhead that, and I think the village could help with resources.
I think we're happily to be involved. I just think that we can't carry all of the efforts of a public education campaign. We certainly are happy to work with DPW, with the Department of Public Works, and with others, with the trustees, on trying to figure out how best to reach people. I'm just saying, on our own, I don't think we can do it, but I think we can contribute the expertise, the talent that we have, the knowledge that we have, and I'd be happy to talk further about how we can work on this collaboratively.
Just following up on that, we have in the past, prior to the consolidation of this committee, the pedestrian committee and Ped and Bike Committee had a very strong education campaign with the community that they developed. We at the village can assist through putting it out through our media channels.
Right.
But similar to, if you haven't read the village manager's memo, if you want to take a look,
I read it every week.
every week. The conservation committee actually provides content to that from education and activities that they're doing.
Right.
And they've collaborated with Shorewood Waters, completely independent from our content. Of course, we review it to see if it's in line, but it's primarily all education based. So even in starting with different efforts with that, the village, we have media channels that we can put things out in, but what has been demonstrated over the course of time in this community is that the volunteer committees who think in a different creative lens and try to get the word out above and beyond our communication avenues has proven beneficial.
Sure. Let me be clear. I mean, I think we can help with the content. It's the channels that we don't have that you have access to. And so I'm sure that we have members who would be helpful to contribute to the content. But beyond that, we need to do it through the things that the village is already doing, like the village manager's memo and other sort of vehicles that you use to get the word out.
Good. Sounds good.
I'll let Sandy come up for a minute, and then Trustee Stokebrand.
Good evening, Sandy Pendleton, 3529 North Frederick Avenue. I serve on the Ped and Bike Subcommittee, Safety Subcommittee, and I also serve on the Parks and Public Spaces Committee, and I'm president of Greater Shorewood Bikers. Thank you all for your service and all the time you put in on behalf of the village. I want to emphasize that the research indicates that vehicle crash, the rate of vehicle crash reduction on streets with these advisory bike lane configurations is 36 to 44%. That's a significant reduction in vehicle accidents. If we could reduce the vehicle accidents in all of Milwaukee by 36 to 44%, that would be an amazing achievement. So the studies indicate this is a safe design. Concerns and objections to advisory bike lanes disappear within 1 to 2 months as people become familiar with this. And out of the 70 streets in the US where these types of lanes have been installed, only 2 have been reversed. One of those streets had traffic volumes that were 2 to 4 times higher than on Edgewood, so I don't think that's a comparable street. And the other one was out in San Diego, near San Diego. And what happened there was a local Fox News reporter decided to do what's the crazy people on the city commission doing now about something where they hadn't really provided the residents any prior notice that this was under consideration. So the mayor reversed the decision within 24 hours and was out there having the paint scraped off. So a debacle of public relations. Fortunately, this isn't just a village project. It's also a city project. The city does a great job notifying local television reporters and local television radio stations that something new is coming. For instance, the protected bike lanes on Kilbourne Avenues. Or there was just an article in the Journal Sentinel yesterday about Van Buren is going to have protected bike lanes installed. I'm sure that came from the PR people with the city or the city DPW. I'm certainly willing, if they need somebody in Shorewood to talk about, this is a great idea, and this is going to make that street safer for drivers, all users, for drivers, for pedestrian, because it will modestly contribute to traffic slowing on this street. We've got an addition of a pedestrian bump out at least at one intersection. That will make it more safe for pedestrians. So I'm certainly willing to get on my bike and go out there and talk to a reporter and tell them this is really a great thing. Everybody, no need to freak out because it's worked on 68 out of 70 streets in the US where it's been installed. This is a great question that Jen raised about what to do with intersections. I can't tell you. That's obviously an issue for the professionals, the design professionals, to look at something like the NATCO Urban Street Design Guide book and say, do we put a Sharrow in there as we enter its intersection? If we add some type of center line, do we put a Sharrow there? Or do we take out a couple parking spaces? I kind of like the idea of taking out a couple parking spaces near an intersection because it increases visibility lines. It lets people see, is a car coming, approaching to that intersection, or is it clear for me to go? So in sum, I think this is, as I said in the memo, I think this is a good thing for the village, and I ask that you approve it. And again, thank you for flying the pride flag this month. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I know Trustee Stokebrand had wanted to say something, and Trustee Lynn, if you do as well. We've got 11 minutes. Ideally, could wrap up a little bit sooner since we've got the full board meeting starting at 7:30. So we'll hear from Trustee Stokebrand and then move on to take action.
So I am a trustee to the Parks and Public Spaces Committee, and I just want to say that regarding the role that that committee would play, I would like to point out that I believe the Conservation Committee for Pollinator Palooza got $100 for the sink at Pollinator Palooza, and I believe the village paid for the sign. So I don't think you should feel in any way that there would be no resources, because I will work to make sure if this falls on Parks and Public Spaces, that money will be made available to you from the village, just as money was made available for conservation efforts. They were not coming up with this on their own. And I think that's an important distinction. There would be financial resources, and I'll fight for it.
Trustee Stopran, just to note for clarification, that funding came through the Shorewood Waters project because it was a collaborative for our MMSD.
I think we can find money somewhere for
Yes,
this.
I was just clarifying for you.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. And, thank you, Gary. You know, I think this is why we have this model in the village, you know, and I'm so glad that, you know, a couple weeks ago, maybe even it was a month ago, actually, I think just about, we sent this, and got this on the agenda of the Parks and Open Spaces and, bike safety people, because I think this is the model of government that makes Shorewood work well, is to have citizen volunteers look at projects that are upcoming to us and just make sure that we're covering all our bases. You know, and I think, as I mentioned at the last meeting that we discussed this with this street, you know, there's a couple main things that are on my mind. You know, number one is, you know, removing the center line makes Edgewood the same as almost every other street in the village. Barely any streets have a center line. And, you know, I bike on all of them, and I biked here today on streets that had no center line. And, you know, the main thing that I'm always concerned about in this village and with these public works projects is slowing down traffic, getting drivers to slow down, forcing drivers to come to a complete stop. I have no problem with that. I love that. You know, and I think, you know, we know that cyclists in Wisconsin have good rights overall in the state code. We have the right to the road. It's our right to use it just as much as anybody else, and we should be protected on the road in that way. And I think that given that we have to collaborate with the city of Milwaukee on this project, we don't own the street ourselves. We cannot just do whatever we want on this one. You know, I think working with the city of Milwaukee with this plan, I think this is the best option of any option that's available to us. So I'm happy to approve this and send this to the full board tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have one final thought, because it's a bus route. I'd be curious to hear what the county says. We don't have anybody from the county here today, do we? But I mean, that's always my question about the bump outs. Because when I was looking at Capitol Drive today, thinking where could we put bump outs, I was like, well, that's a bus stop.
My understanding from our previous action on this and previous discussion is that the city staff does work closely with the county on having those exact conversations, and that I believe we heard that there was a, you know, program that allowed the county to like actually see what was available to make sure the buses could still make the turn. So I believe that is happening, but it's a good concern.
Yeah, that was mentioned at the last meeting. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Then I think that we are ready for a motion here, or a couple of motions here potentially.
All right, I'm happy to make the motions. I'll do advisory bike lanes and curb extensions. I move that the Public Works Committee recommend the inclusion of advisory bike lanes in the Edgewood resurfacing project.
I'll second that. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Motion carries.
Curb extensions, I move that the Public Works Committee recommend the inclusion of curb extensions at the intersection of North Maryland Avenue in the Edgewood resurfacing project.
I will second that as well. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Motion carries as well. That concludes our business for the Public Works Committee this evening. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Public Works Committee adjourned at 7:24 p.m.
Thank you.